Hi guys, Rob here from Solomon Studio. Here's a painting tutorial on Mythic Battles, Pantheon, Infernal Hounds. You can see the finished product spinning around here. It's my first tutorial of this kind, so any hints, tips or feedback on the painting and the video would be greatly received if you can leave them in the comments below. And yeah, I'm looking to do similar for all of the miniatures in the range that I received as part of my pledge, so if you can like, share and subscribe if you find them useful, that would be awesome. Yeah. And here we're starting with the undercoat. We're using Vallejo airbrush improver, water and black surface primer. We're mixing it in the cup. You can start with the flow improver or water, just not the paint. Make sure you're not starting with paint in the cup, dry paint, because it could dry on the needle. Once it's in there, we should get an old brush to mix it around, get it ready in the cup, and then holding the tip on the end, blow some air back through. This is a tip I learnt from Next Level Painting, Kenny Bechet. If you've not seen his channel, I'll link it below. Awesome if you're just starting out, some really good hints and tips if you watch his, if you're just starting out with airbrushing, or if you're looking to pick up new tips. Sorry about the quality on this video guys. Something I learnt whilst doing this is don't have your airbrush compressor on the table that your camera's set up on, because when the airbrush compressor kicks in, it vibrates the camera. But I'm sorry about that. I will adjust that on future cameras. But you can see here, even though the quality is not great, I'm just giving it a coat all over. And we're moving on to the primer here, which is just airflow improver and grey primer, Vallejo grey primer. Just blowing it at a 45-degree angle. The airbrush actually clogs up a little bit here, so I just clear the tip with a toothbrush that I have soaking in water next to the table, and just pull the pin out and push it back in and blow some air through to clear it. And then we're just at a 45-degree angle doing a zenithal coat, just to pick out those details as if light's shining from above and down. That's going to be the base for when we lay our colours down. That pre-shading will show through. It's actually, with the detail on these models, it picks it out quite nicely. Another thing I did learn is don't use white backgrounds, because it screws up the white balance on the recording, so that'll be something I also change going forward. But yeah, we're just a 45-degree angle, giving each one of them a zenithal coat. You can adjust that if you want less of a contrast, less of a transition in shade. I quite like that transition going from the legs up, giving you that shade from below, especially on models like this, because they're supposed to be from hell, or Hades, because hell isn't in Greek mythology, I don't think. Don't quote me on that, or quote me on that if I'm right. So we're moving up to the base colours for the hounds. So on the lighter hounds, we have a mix of Vallejo airbrush flow improver, or flow improver, and water. You can see here it's literally just a little bit in the bottom of the cup to start us off, and then a small amount of Vallejo yellow brown. You can see here it's just a few drops into the mix. We're making such a light mix here, because it is literally just to dust over the top of that pre-shade. Again, blowing air back in to mix it up, making sure none of it's stuck in the bottom, and a brush just to make sure we mix it well. Just start by testing it on a piece of paper to make sure it's coming through. You can see it's literally just going to give you that light tone, and we're just giving it light passes. It's best to do very light passes so we're not covering up that pre-shade. In this video you can just see the wetness of the layer coming through. You can barely see a colour change because it's a light colour. If you want more, you can let it dry and come back. Same process but for the other ones, but with a different colour. We're using Airbrush Flow Improver and Vallejo NATO Brown. And water, same thing, small amount in the bottom of the cup. In fact, because this was a darker colour, I think I made the mix even. I watered down the mix a lot more to make sure that it didn't completely wipe out those pre-shades. As I said, it's best to build it up in layers with airbrushing, I found. So you can just give it a light coat over the top and you can still see those shades coming through then. And then if you're not happy, if you don't feel that it's coloured them enough, you can always go back over. Excuse me. And then once they're dry, we're just going back with the same colours, so yellow brown for the lighter ones, NATO brown for the darker ones, just slightly watered down on a palette, and we're just picking out the raised areas. If you wanted to save time, you could miss this step out. I think it just helps. You can just about make out there in this video, it's picking out some of the muscle tones, just some of that detail on that model going over. The good thing is where we've used that zenithal shading, pre-shading technique and not covered up those tones too much with our base level, it's really easy to see where the areas are that you need to pick up. Before you think, oh, this guy's really fast, it's not. This is speeded up video. It's twice the speed of the actual technique. Yeah, and the same process for the darker ones using the NATO brown. Going through, picking out those raised areas. You can miss this step out if you're happy with the skin tone that you've achieved just with the airbrush. I just thought that there's quite a lot of muscle tone that you could pick out quite well using the brush rather than just the airbrush. One of the things you will notice as we go through these video guys is I painted these not in the order that I would recommend. So there are some steps you'll see finished, but I do them later in the video. The reason I've done that is I've put the video in the order that I would have painted them, having learned what I've done going through. So yeah, it's to help you out so it's not confusing. If you follow the steps of the video, it would be easier than if you actually done them in the order I painted them in. Like some cases I might have done the chains before I did other things. So here we're just painting the bandages, so I'm using skeleton bone from war paints. Yeah, skeleton bone, just a watered down thin coat on there. Doesn't need to be perfect, just making sure you're not going over the lines. It's from Army Painter, skeleton bone. You don't need to be too perfect here, because we are going to put a wash on and then go back and do a highlight level on them. So on this stage you can just quickly whip through all of your hounds, painting the bandages. Yeah, so Agrax Earthshade, water it down a little bit, and then we just paint that over. Obviously wait for the base coat of the skeleton bone to dry from Army Painter, and then we're just using Agrax Earth. It's going to sink into the recesses and show us where those bandages start and finish. I think I also used it to do a little bit on the mouth so I can pick out those details later. And then we're just going back with a highlight on the bandages of skeleton bone. So here I'm individually picking out the bandages. Again, if you were just in a rush to get these done, you wouldn't necessarily need to do this stage. If you just wanted to get them to a stage where you can use them on the table, you could just do the wash. I just find that doing this stage of picking out the individual bandages sells the fact that there's something wrapped around those legs. So here we have Army Painter Plaint Mail, and we're just putting a coat on the chain and collar. Go careful here, because where the chain could be at different heights, it could be touching the skin. You can always just heat the plastic up a little and move it away if you want. But yeah, just try to make sure you don't get the metal on the skin. Don't need to be too worried about the coat you get on the metal areas. It's just making sure you're not getting too much on the skin. It saves you time of having to go back and touch it up later. I think I made, where I was rushing, I did make a few mistakes here and touch it on the skin. Move on to Typhus Corrosion. This stuff's awesome if you're doing any kind of corroded metal. I think I start out here and then think I need to mix it, so I get a coffee stirrer and stir it up a bit, but actually it didn't need stirring up, just a good shake was fine. And this is almost like a glaze wash, but it has like a very grainy texture to it, so your metal's going to shine through, but you're going to get that sort of pitted metal look because of these little grains of texture. So we're just going over the metal areas with this as if it's a wash, as if it's an ink, and then those little grains of texture are going to be great for this step. So we use Riser Rust, which is a dry brush paint. We're just going to dry brush over here, over the top of that, and it's going to pick out that pitted detail and give that sort of rusted metal look. Yeah, if you've not dry brushed before, there's plenty of YouTube videos out there. I'm not going to go into too much detail on it, but the only thing I would say is to get a good dry brush is make sure that you get more off your brush than you think you need to. Yeah, if you get the majority of the material off of your brush, so it looks like you've got hardly any on there, you'll get a much better finish, in my opinion. So here we're just picking out the eyes and the mouth because we're going to do a glow effect on them. So I'm just using the white primer, Vallejo white primer. Any white paint would be fine here. And I'm just picking out the eyes and the mouth. It gives us that base level ready for our glow effect. So we use Flow Improver, water, Enchanted Blue, bringing out the old school paints there. Small amount in the cup. Again, can't stress enough how you don't start with paints, start with the water or the medium, then you're not getting that dry paint in the bottom of your cup to start with. Such like just a few drops to that mix, it's such a watery mix for this glow effect. We almost want it to not show and just give a hint of that colour. Mix it with a brush. So you can barely see it coming out there as I spray onto the paper. And just focusing that on the eyes and the mouth, just giving that hint of blue If anything, I probably overdid it a little bit on mine, and I had to go back and paint some of the skin texture back in. Once you've got that fine glow, you can then use that same mix straight from the airbrush pot just to glaze in to get a more focused detail. So get the faint glow with the airbrush and then glaze in with a brush, and then going back with our white, just picking out the centre of that glow with the white again, as if that's the source of the glow. I believe it's called OSL, Object Source Lighting. There's lots of different tutorials online again. This is a way to do it, not necessarily the way. Okay, so moving on to the bases here. Another old school paint there, Scorch Brown. We're just covering the base with Scorch Brown. Here I paint the rim of the base. I wouldn't do that now, just because the colour we paint on the outside would cover better if we didn't use that darker brown to start with. So here in the tutorial you'll see me paint the edge, but actually if I was you I'd just paint the top. And that's giving us a dark colour so that our crackle effect, when it crackles, gives a dark colour underneath. Once that's dry, use a Grelin. I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, I hope I am. So it's a Grelin Earth and a Grelin Badlands. So we start with a Grelin Badlands. Just taking the coffee stirrer and mixing it up, making sure we've got that, and then taking quite a large amount of it and just plonking it in some random, plonking, technical term there for you, plonking it in some random spots on our base, just putting a couple of areas that are going to have that slightly raised detail. And then we go in with a Grelin Earth. It's a crackle medium paint. And then we're just painting this into the areas that we haven't got that texture on, to give us our cracked base in between. Now, the thicker you apply this, the larger your cracks will be. The thinner, the less cracks, even no cracks if you put it on really thin. So it's good to mix up. Don't put it all at one constant level, because if you mix up how thick you apply it, you can see here, you get a good mix of large and small cracks. Once that's dry, a Terminatus Stone dry brush. This is just to pick out the raised areas. You can see that's really helping there. Now you will find whilst you're doing this dry brush, some of the crackle paint will flick or peel off. That doesn't matter, because when we stick our static grass and static grass tufts to it, you can see here this bit comes off. Doesn't matter, because when we've finished these stages we can cover those with patches of static grass or tufts of static grass. Then take Agrax Earthshade. Here you can see this static grass is already applied. I would advise doing this stage before you do that. So the reason why we're giving this a wash is just to give a more natural look to the base. So instead of one constant tone, this gives us a varying tone across the base, which makes it look more natural. So I get my static grass from, I think it's World War Scenics, WWS scenery. And here we've got dead 4mm tufts and dead 2mm static grass. So we just take, this is PVA glue. You can just put it in random spots. I'm just wiping off the excess from the base. So here you see that little bit where the the crackle came away. I'm just putting a little bit of glue there so I can put the tuft on it and cover that up. It's entirely up to you where you put these on your base. With the tuft, I stick a whole tuft on, but I kind of think that was like they were a little bit too big for this scale of model, so I actually cut those in half with scissors and used sort of half and half as tufts. And here we're just taking the static grass. Do this like so, have a piece of paper, or I think I've got an envelope under here. It's just a clean piece of paper that you can tap the excess off to, and then you can pick it back up and stick it back on. Tap the excess off. If you give your static grass a bit of a blow, that helps sort of puff it up and fluff it up as if it's standing up. And then the good thing about doing it on a piece of paper or an envelope in this case, you can pick it up, fold it in half, tip it back into your bag, and you've got no waste. So yeah, painting the rim of the bases, I use graveyard earth. Some people prefer black on board games or black in miniatures games. I quite like to try and keep the tone similar to what's on the base. I think it gives a much more natural look. So you can see here where it's scorched brown, I actually needed to give these 2 coats of the graveyard earth, but if you didn't paint the rim scorched brown, you probably would have got away with not needing to do that. So here we've got Vallejo matte varnish, excuse me, flow medium. This is just to seal the models in. So you go for a little bit of flow medium in the bottom of the cup. And then the varnish, probably looking at about 1/3 flow aid to 2 parts varnish in this case. Mix it up. The blowing air back through your airbrush method doesn't really work very well on varnish because it's quite a thick, gloopy texture. So yeah, just get your brush in there, mix it up, and then give it a bit of a blowback. Test it on your paper first, and then we're just giving the entire model, base included, a light coat of this matte varnish just to seal the paint in. If you haven't got an airbrush, you can always use a matte spray. And here we're just finishing the models off with, I think it's called Blood for the Blood God. Yeah, it's basically red paint with a gloss medium in it. And I'm just picking out those sort of on the legs of the Infernal Hounds. There's like little cuts, and then on the maw it's like flayed skin almost. So I just go in, pick those areas out. The reason we do this after the airbrush of matte paint, so obviously the matte would have taken that gloss off, whereas we want it to kind of have that wet blood look. This also helps sell the glow effect because it kind of gives a dark colour contrasting against it. So here's the dark skin tone finished. You can see spinning round. And here's the light skin tone finished, spinning round. I actually, out of the two, prefer the light skin tone, but when you've got the same sculpt 6 times, it's quite good to mix the colours up to try and give the impression of different models. So yeah, that's how I paint Infernal Hounds. Like, share and subscribe. Thank you.